I do think it was easier for the average, not saying they didn't have to work hard, they still did, but it was easier for the average person in their generation to buy a home, have a pretty normal job, and to be able to raise a family and make some money on investments. Like they were able to really maximize their income and gain wealth, right? The best way to gain wealth is through, home ownership, purchasing property. And when that's a lot easier and a lot more attainable for the average person, it's just a lot easier to gain wealth. And we live in that same meritocracy today, except today we have the odds kind of stacked against us. So theoretically, we can do all the same stuff. We can, but we're trying to do the same stuff they did, making pennies on the dollar, and expecting to have the same buying power as they did.
It's the Reform or Die podcast, where nothing is off limits and everything must be reformed.
First of all, then, I urge that entreaties and prayer, petitions and thanksgiving be made on behalf of all men, for kings and all who are in authority, so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. This is good and acceptable in the sight of God, our Savior, who desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. That is 1 Timothy 2, verses 1 through 4. And this is Reform or Die. I am Jacob. Kyle, how are you doing?
Doing well. Jacob, our host today. Love it. Love to hear it.
Yeah, I guess. Thatcher, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Fantastic.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm just getting over my fear of public reading and sharing a little bit of scripture. And I think the scripture kind of relates to something we wanted to talk about, just briefly plug. What do you got, Thatcher?
Yeah, so we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, prayer night. Planning on June 12th at Thomas S. Stoll Park, Memorial Park. It's 119th and Quivira. There's a parking lot in the back of the park. As far as I know, don't need to set up anything. I don't know if there's anything else going on at that time, but we're just going to show up and pray. 7 o'clock, maybe for about an hour or so.
June 12th, Friday.
June 12th, Friday. Yep.
What was the park name?
Thomas S. Stoll Memorial Park.
Okay. June 12th, Friday. I will be there.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
We've been just feeling that prayer is so critical for our country, for our churches, for us. And I think Thatcher's it's been on his heart to do more prayer. And so we're grateful for that. And just an opportunity to show up and pray for all sorts of stuff. So.
Oh yeah. We all encourage everybody to just go ahead and do it no matter where you are,
Yeah.
If you know we're going to be doing it that night.
Yeah, you can only pray at that park.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
And I don't know, is there such a thing as too much prayer?
You got to exit your door occasionally,
Yeah, but you could
prayer closet is a closet. You don't want to live in the closet always,
Yeah, I suppose
But
so.
you're right. Most of us probably pray far too little. So I would say probably me. I would be in that group.
Yeah, I think prayer is extremely important, and I think this nation needs a lot of prayer. I think we've seen a lot of issues, and specifically a lot of division, even within the right. The right has kind of had a fracturing, so to speak, and I don't know if you can cleanly draw the line, but you can kind of draw a line between the boomers, the baby boomers, the older generations, maybe a little bit of Gen X, and then the younger generations, the millennials and the Zoomers. And it's a very real thing. I think anyone can see it if they're kind of just looking at what's going on.
Hopefully the boomers are still praying, but
I would hope so. Yeah,
I think they are.
I think they are. Yeah, but
so not a division in that sense.
Not a division in that sense, but politically, I think that's kind of what I'm saying. Our nation is having some division. I think the Republican Party has experienced a lot of pain recently.
Yeah, we're sort of giving a prelude to a video we're going to do a little bit of a reaction to, which is Brandon Straka's channel, I think, here on YouTube. And he's the guy that did like the walk away campaign from the left, because he was on the left and walked away from all of that and joined the Republican Party and has been a supporter of good principles for the country, good policies. And I don't know everything about the guy, but he brought together a panel of 3 millennials and 3 boomers, which is pretty exciting. I was listening to a bit of this earlier, so I've had Jacob's kind of going in a little bit blind. Thatcher's listened to some. I listened to about half of it. I want to listen to the whole thing. It's I think what Jacob's alluding to is like there is a little bit of a divide on the right and a little bit between old and young. And so I don't know if we're going to contribute or validate that or contribute it to it, or also try to heal some of that a little bit. I don't know. I guess we're kind of just chiming our voice in because we've felt it, at least I have. And we'll give it a bit of a review, and we'll kind of play a couple minutes here and there and talk through. So just as an overview, they go through the beginning here. It's a little intro. They kind of introduce themselves in the video. Obviously you guys aren't watching, but you'll be able to listen in. And so they'll introduce each of the speakers and whether they're the millennial side, so you'll know who's who, and then the boomers. And we'll probably pause after each of their intro statements, because the intro statements are pretty fascinating, just to see what do you think about the generational divide that a lot of people are feeling. And I think that's how we'll kick it off. I was going to talk about, 30 million mosquitoes or whatever being released in Florida, but by Google. But then I was like, maybe we should save it for another day. Nothing could possibly go wrong. So
Nothing at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Wonder what boomers think about that stuff, but maybe they'll talk about it. Yeah. All right, so we'll kick it off unless you guys had other thoughts. Jacob?
I did just wanted to say, I think these kinds of things are really good to kind of have that open discourse. That's kind of what we do on this podcast, is we discuss topics that might not necessarily get a lot of airtime. Some people, feel like it's a taboo to have some of these discussions, but
it is uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, but this is a real thing that needs to be addressed. And I'm credit to the boomers for being willing to show up and have a debate with, the younger generation. That is, commendable. I don't know what their opinions are going to be, but I can at least commend them for the fact that they're willing to engage in debate and not just, plug their ears and go la 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 and disregard anything that someone else says. So.
Yeah, and I'll resist taking any cheap shots early. We'll let the video start here. So Thatcher, anything before we jump in?
Nope, go right ahead.
All right, let's go.
I'm Karen Sigmund, and I'm a baby boomer conservative.
George Raisley, and I'm a baby boomer conservative.
Frank Gaffney, and I'm a baby boomer conservative.
I'm Harrison Smith, and I'm a millennial conservative.
Primetime Alex Stein, and I'm a millennial conservative.
Owen Schroyer, I'm a millennial, 3-time Trump voter, and America First nationalist.
My name is Brandon Straka. I'm tonight's moderator, and it's none of your business how old I am. Tonight, we're going to do something that most people in this movement are too afraid to do. We're going to tell the truth about ourselves, the conservative movement. There is a deep and significant fracture inside the right, and it's getting worse. This growing divide is over what loyalty means, what truth means, and what conservative identity means. And it's not only cultural, it's generational. If you're a baby boomer, there's a good chance you have a vastly different stance than millennials, Gen Xers, or Gen Z on many important relevant issues going on now, like the war in Iran, America's relationships with foreign allies, the stability of MAGA, the affordability crisis, AI, and a lot more. Tonight is about dragging the generational divide out into the open and debating all of these topics, whether it's uncomfortable or not. It's about putting the tension on the table and figuring out whether this movement can evolve. And can this be fixed? We're calling this a dinner table debate, meaning we're going to keep it open forum. You are allowed to interrupt each other. You are allowed to keep the passion flowing. I'll interject if anything crosses a line or becomes disrespectful. The only exception to that rule is going to be this first question. in which I ask that everybody agree not to interrupt and to allow each panelist their turn without any interjection. So let's begin the conversation by identifying how the generations are feeling about each other.
All right, so there's your intro. But basically, maybe I said his name wrong. Brandon Straka. I thought it was Straka, but maybe it's Strzok. So I don't know if Straka. I just didn't hear the A on the end there when he said it earlier. So
the A must be silent.
Yeah, the A must be silent. Exactly. Thank you. But yeah, they've got the millennials on the left. I really was only familiar with two of those guys, Primetime 99, Alex Stein, as he likes to call himself. And Owen Schroyer, I believe he was an InfoWars guy for a little while.
I think so, yeah.
Which is now shut down, and which is crazy. But yeah, anyway, so there's that. I don't know any of the boomers. I think one of them might have been involved in some political campaigns and such, so I think they're fairly well versed. They know a bunch of references I don't know to things too, so there's a little humility comes out. But
yeah, I mean, I think with age comes the ability to gain knowledge. I think the longer you're around, the longer you have to learn things. Now, whether or not you make use of that is up to you, but we'll see when we get into it. But I love the idea and the concept of this.
I do too. I think it's actually fantastic because some of my favorite people in the world are my boomer parents, and they're the best. And we agree on a lot. So, but I do think there is somewhat of a divide in general between the generations. So, and I think they're kind of the millennial representatives here are they're kind of using them as millennial and below, I guess. So if you're not a millennial, you can still find value in this, hopefully. But here we go. This should be, I think they go to prime time first. We'll see.
I'm going to start with the millennials and then give the baby boomers the final word. We'll go one by one, each panelist getting 1 minute to answer the same question. Starting with you, Alex, what about the boomer generation is problematic for the success of the conservative movement going forward?
In my personal opinion, one of my biggest complaints about the boomer generation is their lack of self-awareness. You know, this is a generation that was able to buy a home. They were able to have access to a lot of things that we're not currently able to have access to. They didn't have to compete with illegal immigrants for jobs. And I think that it is really boiled down to the fact that they didn't have access to the same information that our generation did because they got the internet so much later in life. And the example that I like to use is like my dad. I've grown up in Dallas, Texas my whole entire life. And if I tell my dad that the CIA was involved in JFK's assassination, he almost wants to hit me because he doesn't believe in conspiracies. But then I talk about the Vietnam War and I bring up the Gulf of Tonkin, which was a false flag attack that brought us into a war that killed thousands and thousands and thousands of people, you know, in a war that he was almost drafted into. He just doesn't understand that because he doesn't know how to work the internet properly. And so I think it is just the lack of self-awareness for the America that they used to live in is gone. It's not the same one that we're in right now. And the fact that they have a lack of information that young people like myself were able to get.
Harrison?
I think so. They called time on him, and also he was really speeding to get through all of his comments there. So if it was fast for you, then it was fast in general.
Yeah, I love Alex Stein. He's hilarious. He's kind of a notorious troll.
He's a big time troll. He's a little annoying.
But I do
think he's funny, but he's a little annoying.
He's a notorious troll, but he's got valid points, I think.
I mean, that was a great speech, I will say. I thought it was, fast. You got through it fast.
Yeah.
So.
If you guys are at home and you want to kind of look at this, look it up and find the video. The way they're cutting the camera to like...
Oh, it's so funny.
It's hilarious. You know, zooming in on certain mannerisms and reactions. It's hilarious. It adds a little bit of comedic effect.
It does. Like the tapping of the hands from the boomers when they're cutting across, and it'll go both ways. They cut over to the millennials when the boomers are talking too. So and it's pretty funny.
I think his critique is valid. I think in a lot of ways, it's a little upfront and kind of brash, but like, you know, generally speaking, I agree with most of what he said there.
I mean, I thought his main points were basically like boomers. The self-awareness comment was mostly about they don't know that the country's fully changed underneath them for the younger generations. They don't really fully grasp the or maybe it's just to the degree that the country is different. They think houses are the same price for people today, representative of like your total amount of wealth that they were, 40, 50 years ago. And it's like, I don't think that's actually the reality. Same with education, it's like it's dramatically changed in how much like real world cost it is.
Yeah, I don't know if I fully agree with his argument. I think there's other reasons why there's a divide, but we'll see if one of the other guys gets to it.
Yeah, what was his second point? But I think
conspiracy theories, not knowing how to use the internet.
Yeah, he kind of was pointing out a lot of them aren't as technologically savvy, which I kind of sympathize with. And some boomers are good, like, you know, they are good with tech. I mean, a lot of them were founding, people in tech. So there are some good people in tech that are boomers, but I will say by and large, it does kind of feel like, and it's not really their fault. They just didn't grow up with it, so they didn't have to learn it, right? I'm kind of waiting for the day when the generations below me are like, you don't know how to AI, bro. And I'll be like, well, I use it every day for work, but I guess I'm still incompetent. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, Thatcher, any thoughts so far? Good so far?
No, so far so good.
Keep it rolling. That was panelist number 1. So here we go. It's going to be all 3 millennials first. So buckle up, people.
I think we need to work together. I know it's supposed to be a debate. I feel like there should be a call to action for the boomers, because I think Alex is right that there's a disconnect with the younger people. And I think the biggest problem with the boomers, if that's the question, it's the holding on and the hoarding of power, and that there's not been a good enough job done of passing power on. I mean, we don't even have Gen X here, right? They aren't even represented. So we've skipped right over them. Now the millennials are waiting for our turn. It's almost like Gen X never got the turn. It's almost like the boomers that got into office in the 60s are still there, still running things, and haven't actually like cultivated that younger generation to replace them and to pick up the reins. And so that causes resentment in the younger generation, which is of course returned, I think, from the boomers, because they feel it and spit it right back. So it seems like the boomer mentality that I hear a lot that gets on people's nerves is, you guys should have seen this place when we got here. It was a paradise, you know?
I would echo the act.
Yeah, so, I mean, he makes an interesting point that basically the boomers, the reason there's no Gen X in this panel is basically Gen X got totally skipped over and ignored because the boomers are still in power, which, I mean, I guess they outnumbered the Gen Xers a decent amount, but it is kind of fascinating that it went right to millennials after Gen X. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that, but I think it almost explains itself.
It's interesting. I do see a lot of Gen X presence within, it seems like they're present in the media landscape more so than they are in the actual political landscape.
Are you thinking of anyone in particular, or just people in general?
Just people in general. I mean, most of
like Megyn Kelly, is she a Gen Xer?
Megyn Kelly, a lot of the
she might be close to. She's not a boomer. She's
not
Gen
a boomer.
X. She's
no.
in her 50s though.
A lot of the big like podcast hosts, a lot of the notable news anchors.
Well, a lot of the Daily Wire guys are in their 40s.
I wasn't referring to the Daily Wire specifically. I was just referring
I'm just thinking
to
of some people. I'm just thinking of references, but
yeah, a lot of the Daily Wire guys are at least like Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, and maybe Walsh would fall into the millennial camp.
I believe
so.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
What is Rogan? Is he in his 50s?
Rogan's going to be a Gen X, I believe. Yeah.
Tucker's a Gen X too.
Tucker's
right?
Gen X.
Yeah.
Alex Jones is Gen X. A lot of these, they seem to occupy the media landscape, not so much.
They
the
were kind of there
landscape.
when YouTube was really first starting to take off. Basically, millennials were kind of right after.
Yeah.
Like we were watching, but we weren't exactly on the front end of creating content. Like
there's a couple that were.
Yeah, that's true.
A common thread you'll notice with a lot of these Gen X, influential Gen X people, is that they have no desire for political office. They'll say as much. They'll say, "I don't want to run. I don't want to be in politics."
Why do
and
you
I'm
think?
wondering if that was maybe like he was just saying they neglected to pass on the torch or to kind of like train up their kids for what they were doing.
But I also think some of it's just demographics. Like Gen X is so small in comparison to the boomers. The boomers are a huge group, right? I mean, they're monstrous compared to Gen X. And then millennials are bigger, I think, than Gen X, I think. But I'm not 100% sure. I'm kind of making up stats here, but that was my impression, was Gen X was small, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, source, I made it up.
Yeah, exactly. Source, go check it for yourself. Don't take Kyle's word for it. Any other thoughts? And we'll go to the third. This is Owen. I kind of cut it off in mid. Maybe I'll give him a couple more seconds back here.
I would echo the access and the influence that Harrison is talking about, where I think millennials feel like they're kind of getting cut out of the deal. And what I would use the current example of what's happening on the right wing right now. If you want to use a specific example, if you talk about any war, but in this case, the Iran war, the younger generations are done. They are anti-war. They vote against wars. This has been proven in multiple election cycles. And it feels like here's the millennials. We just put this administration in the White House. We put Republicans in charge of Congress. And it's like, okay, we did that, and then what do we get? We get right back to the same boomer foreign policies. We get right back to the same boomer policies. And now we're sitting here saying, well, wait a second. We're the ones that got this administration in power. Why aren't we getting represented? And I feel like it's different when you say that to maybe a 20-year-old and you say, hey, you're still young, you have experience. We're in our 30s now. We've come of age now. We are about to inherit this country now, and we feel like with every election cycle, what we're inheriting is getting less and less. The civilization is declining, and we're simply saying, hey, we've come of age. This is what we voted for, and we're not getting it. And so I think that that's the generational divide.
All right, same question.
Yeah, I kind of paused there because I thought he called time on him, and then he gave him like 2 more seconds to finish that thought. So what'd you think about that, Jacob? Forever Wars, is it your thing? I thought it was your jam.
Yeah, no.
I thought you loved Forever Wars.
No, I agree with him quite a lot. That's the main issue that I see, and I'm sure they'll get into it more, is the fact that we have the older generations advocating for wars that they're not going to fight. We have the older generations advocating for policies that they're not going to have to live through, that they're not going to have to raise children under. Right, their kids are already gone. They're out in the world. They're advocating for these things for, whatever their grand vision is, the greater good, whatever their idea of that is, against the will of the people who actually have to do the thing and live through the thing.
You mean the octogenarians in office aren't thinking about the young people today? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think so. It brings me back to Ed Gallierain, right, who beat Thomas Massey in his election. The only thing he really campaigned on was reinstating the draft. Like,
that's super popular with young people.
Yeah, that's
I was
super duper popular with young people. That's exactly what we want. We just want to get drafted so that we can go die somewhere else for some reason that we're not sure about. But I digress.
They'll get into some of that because there is a decent amount of that. Foreign policy is a big one that at least Owen, as the person who was just speaking, representing the millennials, he is not happy with a lot of the foreign policy. And, it wasn't too long ago we had a show or two on how we felt about the war in Iran. And I will say I somewhat took the administration at the face value of 3 to 4 weeks. And then I said, okay, well, they are going to take a little longer than that. And okay, well, here it's a little bit longer and we're close. I've been told like this week was supposed to be a peace deal. I don't know if it's happened or not.
I've been told the war's over.
Yeah, I don't know.
A couple times.
Is it? I don't know. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
Which I'm criticizing a little bit here.
Yeah.
But I hope people hear that in the right spirit. Like when I am critical, it's because I want us to do well. I want Trump, team Trump, Republicans, conservatives, MAGA. We need to be ascendant against the godless left because the left in this country want to sacrifice our children at altars, basically. Like it's insane what they're doing to this country. And, it's what they did in the Old Testament times, putting children to death. So when I criticize our side, I am doing it very much in the spirit of I am still on full support for the right wing in this country. I just want us to live up to our standards and our high ideals, right? And that's kind of what the left sometimes criticizes the right about. So like, oh, you're racist. It's like, actually, the West was the first place in the whole globe that ended slavery. We're like the only ones that actually lived up to the ideals that we espoused, right? And then we get criticized for like doing that,
And the people who ended the practice of slavery in the West were Christians.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to remember that. That is our heritage that we come from. So we should continue on that path. We should continue to do great things in the name of Christ. We should be living up to that standard, right?
Yeah. And so, when we are being critical, I think hopefully the listeners will know that it's in the right spirit of, I am very much still wanting to strive for good policy, good values in our country, Christian policies, Christian values. So that's the spirit of it. And I think that you'll hear a little bit in here of sort of the divide, and the younger generations are very anti-war, and I understand that.
So were the boomers when Vietnam was going on.
I was going to say pretty much every younger generation is anti-war until they get older and they learn more and
then they're for it. Yeah. Interesting. Are you still sort of, where do you stand on all the Iran stuff, Thatcher? Are you still feeling like it's a good thing overall, or like, I mean, because I have sympathies a little bit both ways. Like I'm no love lost over some of the evil people that, you know, that are no longer. But on the other hand, it's like, I don't know, you know, it's always tough when you're calculating people's lives in a conflict. It's like, gosh, I don't know how to make that calculus, you know?
Yeah, I don't like war. And I said, I kind of took the middle ground on it last time as well, saying we need to wait. And I still think we have a valid time slot of waiting still. I mean, it's only been, 3 months? Roughly.
Is it really only been 3?
Not even quite 3 months.
Oh, you're right, because we've only been doing this for about 3 months.
Yeah, so I think it's still out. I've heard some positive stuff, heard some negative stuff. It seems like if some people would just, you know, sit down and shut up, some things would get done on both sides. I think, you know, give it to the end of this month. You know, we'll see what we got.
Yeah, it's hard to put a timeline on things.
Yeah,
I also, now that you say it's only been a few months, I'm like, that is still pretty short. But on the other hand, I think my biggest problem was last time, probably still is just the feeling of being lied to. Because I think, you know, millennials in particular went through the whole Afghanistan, Iraq. They saw all that, the amount of lying. And it was early days internet too, I feel like, where, you know, all the people who knew how to use the internet really well were kind of being lied to. And so it's like now, you know, the boomers are getting even older, and it's like, do you really know what's going on? Like, I don't know. So,
well, let's give the boomers the benefit of the doubt.
I know, we need to
listen to them.
You're right. We'll get over there. So here we go. I think this will be the first of 3 from these guys. They have this epic layout too. Brandon Straka's in the middle, and they have these like throne looking chairs. It's hilarious. They're not really, but a little bit. And the millennials on their left and the boomers on the right. So
it's also interesting to me that it looks like the millennials are dressed a little bit more professionally than the boomers.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Alex Stein's sporting some New Balance shoes or something there. It might not be quite up to par, but he's hilarious.
But still, you know, little observation.
Yeah, true. Here we go.
All right, same question for the boomers. What about the millennial generation is problematic for the success of the conservative movement going forward?
Well, I think that the biggest problem is that too many millennials and younger generation alleged conservatives have adopted the rhetoric and much of the views of the left. And so there's an expectation on the part of younger people that they're going to arrive at the top where their parents left them when they kicked them out of the nest. And to those who think that this is not a meritocracy, that boomers are hoarding onto power and all of that kind of stuff, that's a classic leftist trope. And so, in my view, the biggest problem that millennials and younger people present to the movement is this demand for access. And my question to them, or my challenge to them, is do what I did. Go out and take it.
It's a funny question.
And there, I think the next person's jumping in, but yeah, I don't love that take. Of all the boomers, he may have been the worst one, if I remember right. It's sort of a weird thing because this is just what I thought, and I'll kick it over to you guys, but thought what he was saying is we really live in a meritocracy, and it's true even playing field is the idea behind that. And boomers are just winning. And you younger people feel entitled to success where you haven't earned it. That's basically the gist of what I got out of that. What did you guys kind of take away from that? And is it right?
Yeah, I didn't like that very much, but maybe that's just me being you know, Gen Z,
younger,
millennial, whatever I am. But I agree with them that we live in a meritocracy. I think we do. The thing is, the meritocracy has changed, and it's changed a lot. I think for the average, you can look up all the statistics on this. There's a million graphs that you can look at that kind of coincide with this as far as like cost of living, housing, all that stuff versus wages. I think that it's changed. I do think it was easier for the average, not saying they didn't have to work hard, they still did, but it was easier for the average person in their generation to buy a home, have a pretty normal job, and to be able to raise a family and make some money on investments. Like they were able to really maximize their income and gain wealth, right? The best way to gain wealth is through, home ownership, purchasing property. And when that's a lot easier and a lot more attainable for the average person, it's just a lot easier to gain wealth. And we live in that same meritocracy today, except today we have the odds kind of stacked against us. So theoretically, we can do all the same stuff. We can, but it's like we're trying to do the same stuff they did, making pennies on the dollar, and expecting to have the same buying power as they did. Like here's just a little example, and then I'll move on. My house that I live in was built in the 50s. When it was built, I want to say it cost I think it was probably under $5,000 to buy that house, which was a lot more money in the 50s than it is today, but it was still extremely attainable. And it's not a fancy house. It's a small house, what you would expect a cheap house to look like. That was a lot more attainable in the 50s. When I bought it, it was like $139,000, right? Which was cheap at the time. I've been there for a few years. Now it's over 200, right? So even just in the time since I purchased my house to now, I'm seeing that ceiling, or I guess that bottom level, it's really like the cheapest house you can get, rising up. And for the average person who works like, a normal job, maybe someone who doesn't have a college degree because they can't afford to go to college, that eats into a lot of your income to have a house that's over 200,000, 250,000. If you want to raise kids, good luck. So that's my view on it personally.
Thatcher, anything to add?
Yeah, I don't really like how he phrased it necessarily, but I do feel like, because they feel like boomers are out of touch. I think millennials can tend to be a bit entitled as well. Now, I think it was easier back in the day to get that wealth and get a house, but I feel like you had way fewer options on how to get the wealth. You put your head down, you're a shoe salesman, you work in a factory, you do those jobs, or you could start a business. We have a lot more avenues now to make money. And a lot of people aren't willing to use those other avenues. They're just like, I'm just going to put my head down and just work, 40 hours, 60 hours a week at a job that pays, not enough. And they're not willing to step out of their comfort zone and do other things to build up that wealth when there's so many ways to make money.
Yeah, this was, I don't want to misspeak on this, but I'm pretty sure there was some clip from Dave Ramsey's show or podcast. I don't know what it is 100% because I don't really listen in, but he was like, why are you spending all this money on like coffees and whatever? And it's like, on the one hand, I understand the point. It's like, be responsible with your money. I get that. But on the other, it's like, I think the part they're not necessarily factoring in is you can't buy a house. Like half the people can't buy houses anyways. So it's like, they don't see like, they're already in debt up to their eyeballs. It's almost kind of like there's a reason why a lot of young people want the government to forgive all their student loans, right? Because they're like, they've been paying them down for 10 years and they haven't gotten any smaller. It's like, I sympathize with it. We could talk about the student loan thing, but we can leave that for the next, we'll get the next boomer representative in here, unless Jacob wants a quick comment.
I just had one little comment. And I agree with what Thatcher said, but I guess the only place that I would push back on that is I agree that we can be entitled. Millennials can be very entitled. But the argument that we have more avenues to make money, like you can start a business and be very successful with a business online even, which they didn't, boomers didn't have access to that.
Yeah.
But the argument still stands, like we cannot, you cannot today support a home and a family on a single income working a job that is like a job that traditionally boomers could have done and support a family. And those jobs are critical jobs. People have to work them. And I think that ties into the immigration issue, because you can't do that job anymore because you can't afford to live if you do that job. So then we bring in people who are willing to do it, because back home they make like $5 a week. Here they make, $15 an hour. That doesn't cut it for owning a home, but I think it's kind of shifted. So now you have to, if you want to be successful and get ahead, you almost have to do something else. You have to start a business, which there were a lot of boomers who started businesses, but you didn't have to do that. And it's objectively harder to start a business than it is to just work in an industry job where you do something that's important, right?
There's a lot that's changed. I mean, we've mentioned this stat on the podcast before, but in the 60s, the country was 90% white Christian. Today, it's below 40% white Christian. So, we've gone from the family being the core unit of society to really workers being the core unit of society. We see men and women are interchangeable in the workplace. They don't really have defined roles anymore. And so what you get from that is, if everyone's a worker, then if you want to have a family, you need to hire a nanny to raise the children. And you basically export the family duties now. So there's a lot that has changed, and it changed slowly. And you'll hear that from millennials, is they kind of sympathize a little bit, because like some of these things are hard to know that they're happening until you kind of look back and you're like, crud, a lot happened there. And I wasn't fully aware. Or maybe they did know and they were trying to solve it, but problems are hard to solve. So we'll let the next rep here get in on this.
A funny question, because I think over all time, the younger people have always felt that the older people had something that they didn't have access to, and the older people think that the younger people have greater expectations than maybe they should have. I think the whole notion of a gap between generations, this is so not new, that it's having an effect on the current political climate is particularly interesting. But having been a teacher and seeing a lot of millennials, I think there's so much that's being broken deliberately for you all coming through. I don't know that I would call it the affordability problem or whatever, but I think expectations have been given to you that aren't necessarily fair.
Time.
So he called time. But, one of the things I do want to point out is just, I think that maybe because I've pre-listened to this a little bit, but one of the things they don't really talk about is just how dramatically insane the world is now. Like the trans movement, all this, the degradation of the culture is at a level that I don't think the boomers now they're upset about it. Right. But I mean, I don't know that they're fully imagining trying to grow up in that chaos, that moral soup, of chaos that young people today are growing up in. And another thing that I was thinking is, with the internet and so much of life moving online, things have really changed in a way that nobody fully understands. Like, I'll just give you one example that I came across the other day, just reading about it, but it's called aesthetic convergence. And it's the idea that the internet has basically merged people's tastes. It's now global taste. It's not your local flavor or taste of X, Y, or Z. There's global standards now because of the internet, of beauty, of fame, of whatever, of attractiveness or whatever it could be, right? And this affects dating. It affects, buying, because you can purchase anywhere. You can go and move, right? Moving was a big deal back in the day. Now it's like expected that you'll move in the software world. You'll move every couple years. It's almost expected, especially early on in your career, that you'll jump around. Back in the day, the boomers would work 30 years at the same job and just move up. And, and it supported a family. And so there's been a lot that's changed, but that's just kind of my 2 cents on some of it. Sorry, we're, supporting the millennial side a little bit much here, but we are millennials, I guess.
I'll give her some credit, I suppose. I think it is to an extent true that we do have unrealistic expectations. Now, who set those expectations? And why are those expectations unreal? Should they be unrealistic?
So let me ask, which ones do you think are just for the sake of, I'm not trying to say you're wrong. I'm just saying, what do you think is one of the unreal expectations that the younger generations have?
I think the younger generation has unreal expectations set by what they see online. And kind of going to what we talked about a little bit ago, they have the expectation that they can start a business and whatever, and it's just going to work because they see everyone else doing it. And they'll just be able to, hey, this guy started a vending machine business and now he's a millionaire after 2 years. That doesn't necessarily always work. Like, a lot of times the best option is to just work a normal job or, to be in the trades, those kinds of things.
I will say there's some doomerism that's wrong expectations. And some of that is not knowing how to sift through what's real versus what's not. Like, for example, like the climate movements and stuff, like thinking about the earth is going to die off in 10 years or whatever. And it's like, yeah, people have been saying that since the 80s and before, right? It was a global cooling movement in the 80s. They said the world's going to freeze. And then by the 90s, 2000s, it was global warming. And now it's just climate change, but it really still means global warming.
It's just a fluid situation.
Yeah. But a lot of young people they have the expectation that like we're toast. Like the whole thing, the whole world is toast. Everything's toast. Yeah. And they don't know how to, and maybe this is a bad example, but they don't know how to set their expectations or reality, I guess, or find reality sometimes. And that's hard. And especially because I don't know if they had good coaching. And it's kind of funny because if the younger generations are entitled and they were raised by the older generations, is that a failure? I've never heard a boomer say we failed to raise you properly. It's our fault. I've always just heard you're entitled.
I think generally speaking, we would acknowledge that if a child turns out poorly, it has something to do with the parents, how they were raised, right? Generally speaking. But
you don't hear that from the people who raised the kids.
But your point about expectations, I think one of the expectations that we have set that's not realistic is, and I hear this a lot, why would I want to bring a kid into this world? Because their life is just going to be horrible and things are going to be so bad for them. I would never want to bring a kid into this world, which leads that expectation of their child's life being horrible and the world ending or whatever. It leads them to not have children, which not having children significantly decreases the quality of your life in a lot of cases, because having children is a blessing.
They do studies that show that people who are married are generally much happier than people who are not, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then one of the other things that I would say that's a benefit for the boomers, not a direct one-to-one correlation, but as we are going through these unprecedented times that are crazy beyond what anyone can imagine, they also went through unprecedented times. They lived through the 60s, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. We had a presidential assassination. We had a war where people were getting drafted. We had, all these drugs and stuff going on. We had a total culture shift. We had, there was a lot going on. There were terrorist cells within the United States blowing up bombs, blowing up courthouses and judges and kidnapping people and hijacking airplanes. It was a very common thing happening. So they lived through some stuff that we can't even understand.
But did the boomers, were they all in the wars? Or was it older boomers that were in the wars?
It's not necessarily that they were even in the wars, just they grew up in that, right? That's what they grew up through, right?
Gotcha.
That's the environment. And it was unprecedented. So to give them the benefit of the doubt, they grew up in a similar time to what we're growing up to, as far as it being unprecedented and crazy, absolutely insane. So
I'll give a small counterpoint because I think you're right on a lot of fronts. But think about the 90s. The 90s economic boom was happening when the boomers were in their 30s. When I was turning around that age, there was basically an economic collapse, So it's just, there are some differences, right?
Yeah, but we lived through the crypto revolution, dude.
Yeah,
We just
and
got into
if I had been
Bitcoin.
wise and bought crypto really early, maybe I would have been fine now.
If you would have just bought those 10 Bitcoin when your weird friend in New York told you to, you'd be rich.
You jest, but like legitimately, that is a real story. People I knew were like, dude, what are you doing? Buy all the Bitcoin you can right now. It was before it really got like the first big bump. Mistakes made, mistakes made.
But to my point is, we do live, like, culturally speaking, we both lived and grew up in unprecedented cultural times. I think most people grow up in
different
unprecedented
challenges
times.
for different generations, for sure. Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing with this is we're all talking about, oh man, this is so hard for us, or and they'll say it was so hard for us back then. I think we're gonna get that, our kids down the line or our grandkids, if we ever have them, like we're gonna have the same debates and conversations. It'll just be, millennials versus, Gen Alpha or whatever,
Gen Beta.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I think you're right. I will say, though, I think the reason why this feels so pressing is the internet's a relatively new thing, but also I do think, a lot of family breakdown has happened over the years.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's some of that that's bleeding into this, but also I do feel that millennials and younger, they don't feel very shepherded. Like they don't feel like they've been guided through life. They feel like they were kind of left to be raised by themselves, or that their mentors and people they looked up to really, really, really failed them. And I'll just give one example that was recent. And I love our pastor, but one of the things he was saying, we were going through Psalm 40, and I could give the direct quote, but he basically opened with a joke. And the joke was, if you're single, unmarried, don't have kids, and don't have a job, you've got no problems in life. And it was like, ha, 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 ha. And it was like, I mean, I get the like kind of point behind the point is like when you have a family, you gain new responsibilities. And I understand that. But I think it's just really extremely out of touch with the problems the younger generations are going through. So it's like boomer preaching to, other boomers really, and not kind of taking into account like the butt of that joke is the young people, frankly.
Yeah, that one would play really well at like a marriage conference, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the other thing is like, this has been another thing that I thought we could review at some point, but Steven Crowder did a whole episode on his show over that, the stat that was floating around on the internet was basically like from 1975 to 2025, the change in marriage rates for men and women. And it was like in the 80s%, for women, and it's down to 25% married by 30. And it's down to 15% in 2025 married by 30 for men. So you are literally in like an elite class of a man if you're married before 30 in 2025. And I think people don't understand. It's like the pastors don't understand because they just like they're boomers. They got married younger. They never really dealt with this extended singleness. And when I was growing up, I had tons of messages that were, railing on like extended adolescence and how it was, you need to grow up, young man. And it's like, well, I mean, you're preaching at me, but I don't know how to make somebody like just marry me. Okay. Like, I don't know how to do that. I'd love to respond to this call here, but I don't know how to make that happen. Right. And I think you'll hear the comments sometimes, not to get too much into dating, but just as an aside, since I know people care about this topic, because young people do care about that, is it's like, okay, well, how do you do it? Well, the boomers will say, just go ask her out, bro. And you're like, I did. And she said no. And the next girl said no. And the next girl said no. So it's like, okay, well, what do you do? Right. There's a lot of people facing that. Can't buy houses, can't find that person. They almost feel like their life hasn't pushed a start button yet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. But I'm in a different phase in life.
You are.
So I'm looking at it from a different point of view, but I understand what you're saying for sure.
But I guess the overarching point before we get to the third one here is just, I think there's the feeling of being misunderstood by the older generations. And that would go a long way to bridging that gap is just like, and I think that this whatever podcast panel that Brandon's putting together is kind of, I think it's maybe a way of trying to merge that and in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we had an unhealthy version of this several months ago where we were basically first debating the whole, very publicly having fights between prominent Gen Xers or boomers and other, media personalities over Israel, right?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the rift started happening, I guess you could say, on the right, was over that topic. And they're going to get into that a little bit more here, I think. But shall we go on to the next one?
Yeah. Unless that tries.
No, go ahead.
All right, let's do it.
Well, so much more to
But
say.
we have a lot more. We have a lot more time. Frank, go ahead.
These are, of course, sweeping generalizations, but the question is teed up that way. My biggest concern is that the millennial generation has embraced the idea that the world is irrelevant. It's about us. It's about the sharing of power, distribution of it, controlling it. My fear is, as was mentioned, you are about to inherit a very messy world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not with us in trying to make it more consistent with our vital security interests and freedoms, it's not going to be recoverable, I fear. And that's what makes me most worried about the next generation's handoff here.
I mean, he didn't really say much there. It was kind of quick, but I think he was kind of saying, like, let's team up in the best reading of what he's saying. But I mean, it was kind of veiled, but I think he's foreign policy is a little different than the millennial panelists, I would say. He was kind of saying we need to protect America's interests. And I think he sounded like he was leaning a little foreign policy-ish with that rather than, affordability like the young people were kind of saying. But we can, there wasn't much to go on for that one. So we'll just probably keep rolling here.
I'll just say it just seemed kind of odd.
Yeah, it was
the
a
way
little
he said
strange. I thought the lady did the best job of all the three.
Yeah.
For the opening thing. I
For the
thought.
boomers. Yeah, for the opening statements. The first boomer guy, I haven't been reading the names because they come up after they start speaking, so I can't really introduce them each time. But you can listen to them and it's fine. But the first speaker was just like, oh boy, really hitting the. I'm sure he's actually saying what a lot of boomers feel. They do feel that about their kids, which is,
Yeah. I know, like I said, I know a couple of the millennial guys. I don't really think I know any of the boomers on the panel. And maybe I've come across them or something before, but I don't know. Maybe they didn't give the boomers a fair shake with some of the people that they had on there. Maybe they did. I don't want to be disrespectful.
I don't really know the best representatives for the boomers necessarily.
I don't really know either.
But their perspectives are, it's important for us to listen to what they're saying.
Sure.
I think Jacob was right and you were right about, like, we should take to heart the idea of entitlement. It is, I think what maybe is lost in translation is the internet raises your expectations. Like, they don't really know that to that degree, right? And like, they've done this with the problem of choice. If you offer someone 3 flavors of ice cream, they pick and they're happy. If you offer them 30 flavors of ice cream, they pick and they're unhappy. So like that kind of idea is almost baked into the reality of young people's lives, is just because of the nature of there being so many choices, they're by and large a lot more dissatisfied with life. And so that can shine through. But that's like one way to explain a bit of that gap, I think, is it looks like entitlement. But if you kind of understand what the younger generations may be going through, that's like their unique problems that they're facing, maybe it becomes a little more easy to understand. My boomer listeners out there, I don't know. I know I've got at least one Gen X listener, and there's some boomer listeners. I'm sorry to all of our boomer listeners. They probably hate me after this.
They'll be fine. They got thick skin. So.
That's true. They've heard it before. They're used to dealing with us. All right, we'll keep rolling.
The America First side of the political spectrum has taken a much firmer stance on H-1B visas compared to the Trump administration. Many of them want to send all H-1B workers back to their home country and terminate the program, while the Trump administration is expanding it. Let's take a look. The graphic on the screen shows the disparity in income between the wages of American citizens and the wages of H-1B visa holders along a spectrum of multiple professions. So which direction is more likely to help the American people?
Well, I think that the graph is a pretty telling
So Owen's about to talk about the graph, but it's basically a median wage comparison between certified H-1Bs versus all workers. And the certified H-1B applicants or applications, they're like not quite double, but maybe 25% more.
Like 25%.
Some of them are almost double the amount of money. So it's a unique thing. But yeah, we'll let Owen talk about it a little bit here. And this is the first topic, and it kind of deals with immigration basically and the changing demographics and what younger people maybe are having to experience that the older generations didn't necessarily have to. So here we go.
Pretty telling story right there. And I think that this gets back to the conversation where I just feel like boomers never dealt with this. I feel like boomers never dealt with a job market that was inflated by foreigners. And this is where I think that millennials are a little more resentful to the Republican Party, even spiteful and contentious, you might say, is because we continue to get screwed over on this thing. Trump was supposed to be different, and he's going right back to the same neocon boomer policies that have been angering my generation since we've gotten out of college. And so you just see it again. They say one thing, they do the complete opposite. And to us, it's like, why are you doing this to us again? And it doesn't matter if you're a left-wing millennial, a right-wing millennial. We're all having to deal with this.
Into this, because I think one of the main reasons I wanted to do this conversation is when we look at the generational divide, that piece of the divide that's happening in MAGA right now. What I find, and obviously I'm generalizing, is that it seems like within the boomer generation, there is a lot of resistance to any sort of criticism of Trump. And I don't really understand that. So I'll let you guys speak for yourselves here, but what is your position on that when we talk about, Trump wanting to expand the H-1B program?
Well,
so I'll jump in here, and this is kind of a weird one for me, but I kind of feel similarly to the boomer side on this one, where I try not to be overly critical of Trump. But on the other hand, the H-1B stuff, I agree with the points the millennials are making, that I'm not happy about, like the way that he's like talking about having, I don't know how many thousands of Chinese foreign exchange students coming over and stuff like that. It's like, we don't really want our schools filled up with, people
Spies.
Spies. Yeah. I mean, legitimately that the Chinese do this. Like it's part of the way they operate. So, like I thought, and this is partly why I think the millennial panel is pretty angry, and I get it. Like they're upset because Trump promised to be different than a standard politician. And Owen was kind of hinting that it feels like he's kind of conformed back into this, what Owen thinks of as a boomer mold of just being a rhino, of just being the next person. Right. And so I kind of feel similarly to both sides, where it's like, yeah, I am still very pro Trump. I'm also not happy, but I will say that this millennial panel maybe is a little bit more intensely upset with Trump. And I think there are a lot of millennials that are intensely upset because they feel lied to. And I think it's also because they feel lied to by someone who's older and they've felt that their whole lives to one degree or another. So maybe that's reading too much into it, but that's my reading so far on sort of the backdrop here. You guys, anything to comment, or we'll keep going?
I mean, yeah, I'm not one. I'll take a step back and pause before I criticize Trump too much. I think there's stuff he can be criticized on, and I don't know a lot about H-1Bs, but from what I've heard, I'm more against them than I am for them. And he's talking about this being an unprecedented thing. It's like, yeah, boomers never really had to mess with that, and we have to mess with that. But there was plenty of things that boomers, never had to. They had to mess with something that their generations above them didn't have to mess with. It's just different times.
I think the fundamental difference between the millennials and the boomers here, specifically on the H-1B thing, is the fact that the millennials are the ones who are working. The millennials are the ones who are looking for jobs and in the industry actually working. They don't like the fact that their jobs are being taken by people who are not American. And they're making more, apparently, which is a shock to me. I didn't know H-1Bs were making more than Americans. I know from a lot of these countries that they come from, their work ethic is a little bit different, meaning they'll, work insane hours and have no work-life balance, which is not really the American culture, but it is the culture over there. So they're used to it and they're fine with it. But the millennials are the ones who are engaging in the industry. They're the ones who are working. The boomers are investors. The boomers do well financially when the industry, when the companies do well. So just my view of it is that the boomers want the company to make as much money as possible, which means doing whatever they can to make as much money as possible.
Like big business, basically.
Yeah, and if that means, because that's how they make money, that's how their investment grows. And if that means neglecting hiring Americans for the jobs, they're fine with it.
Because they've already basically struggled it out and made their first bit of money, which is now compounding in interest.
Yeah.
I think I don't want to misspeak here, and so you could look at this up at home, but I think the boomer generation still holds like more than 80% of all wealth.
That sounds
it's something
right.
like that. Like millennials are finally starting to crack in, and Gen X is like this little tiny little sliver, if I remember right. Or maybe Gen X is slightly bigger. I can't remember, but it's not like they really Gen X and millennials barely hold a piece of the pie financially. It's all boomer held still.
I think that's the investment versus engagement. I think that is the crux of the issue and why they actually kind of feel the way they do. I don't know what their arguments are going to be. Well, we'll see.
And this is something that I don't remember who made this comment, but I remembered it, and I will reiterate it for you all as our dear listeners, but and you can decide whether it's true or not. But someone said when the boomers were growing up, it was a wealth generating society, and now it's a wealth holding society. Like the wealth is being held essentially. Like back then it was like there was so much economic boom and growth at various times. Certainly they had their downturns as well, but yeah, I just think that's kind of interesting thought. I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems to ring true to me a little bit, especially with our mounting national debt, but we'll keep going here.
Well, here's the thing. I think that there's a little bit of confusion here between the conservative movement or movement conservatism and MAGA. MAGA is a marriage of convenience between a lot of different interests that came together to elect Donald Trump to enact certain policies that they all sort of agreed on. And they are justifiably pissed because Trump has walked away from some of those things, or at least not got them done as fast as he said he would during the campaign. The conservative movement is an entirely different thing. It is based on a set of principles that Trump has, a very limited, affinity for, but essentially, Judeo-Christian values, government informed by the Declaration of Independence, implemented by the Constitution, classical economics, free market economics, and I would suggest also the lessons of World War II and the Cold War regarding threats to our freedom.
George, where is this Trumpless conservative movement that you're referring to? I'm not seeing.
I think it's over here, I would say.
Okay.
I would say too.
I was going to say it's right here.
There were two things. Well, there were two things that you said, and I'm curious if we can expand on these things that I know.
So pause it right there, because that was a very interesting thing. He was basically saying Trump almost is like not a part of this whole thing, even though he is. And then the young people agreed, and then the older people kind of agreed, or one of them did. I was like, I don't know where that came from. This was probably one of the most surprising things to me of the whole panel.
I pretty much agreed with that guy. I was surprised that I would agree with him. Like, it's true. There's MAGA and then there's the conservative movement, and, they might have some overlapping goals, but that's very interesting. I was not expecting that from the guy who had the worst opening statement.
Yeah, it's at least a better way of he expressed himself very well. I don't know how if I agree with it 100%. He was kind of almost saying Trump almost doesn't care about the Constitution. I'm like, I don't know if maybe that's how I was getting from some of it.
I don't think he was saying Trump doesn't care about the Constitution. I think he was referring more so to some of the other issues, probably specifically when it comes to other moral issues.
I'll have to listen to it again.
Trump doesn't necessarily have a moral responsibility for some of these issues, but he kind of falls in line based on what the party wants.
Well, it's funny because I think what's happening is he's basically saying the older guy is saying, the boomer is saying, I'm essentially a conservative, not a MAGA Trumper. And then Owen is agreeing that he's like moved on from Trump because he wanted Trump to be what he said he was going to be. He didn't feel like he lived up to that. And so they're both saying, yeah, we're not for Trump, which to me, I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, I'm like with Brandon. Brandon's kind of beside himself. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, that's how I felt. I'm like, we should be pulling in the same direction and encouraging Trump with all of our means to live up to the standards and vote for the next guy that's going to do even better than Trump is doing. Like, because Trump's on his way out, right? He's got 2 more years left.
But that's still 2 years.
It is 2 years. But Trump, Trump, he's pretty set in his ways. I mean, he does respond sometimes to a big backlash. Like he took down that one post that, like after some of the Christian backlash he took down. I think we talked about it on the podcast like 7 or 8 episodes ago. And I was saying, like, let's not be too critical of the guy, but
I was pretty critical.
Jacob was critical.
So,
but we've learned, we've grown.
So here's my view on the whole Trump thing. I would not go so far as to say, walk away, be done with Trump. I am never going to be done with anybody, really. I'm always going to push them towards the correct path, right? I always want whoever is in office to do something correct and to succeed. I want, like, back when Biden was president, I don't agree with Biden at all. I'm not supporting Biden, but I want Biden to do good things still. Very unlikely that it would happen, but I want him to do good things.
And we pray that he would,
and you pray that he will, Same with Trump. Like, I have more support for Trump than I do Biden, obviously, because Biden was
hopefully by a country
Biden
mile.
was like a wet paper bag. I don't know exactly. There wasn't really any soul there. I mean, I'm not saying Biden doesn't have a soul, but not
a lot of mental awareness, really. He didn't know where he was half the time.
But I mean, being someone who's voted for Trump 3 times, that's me, who's also critical of Trump, I support Trump and I want him to do what is right. That doesn't mean that I can't call out what's wrong and get kind of, upset when he does certain things, but I don't agree with the idea of just like abandoning your party, especially if you still hold all this like similar values to your party.
You're having an annoyingly reasonable take right now. I kind of wish you were just way out on a limb and I could criticize you, but whatever you said right there was very rational and made a lot of sense to me. So it's kind of unfortunate. I really wanted to jump on you with both feet, but I can't right now. Yeah. I feel like Owen is having the reaction that a lot of younger people are having that had high expectations of Trump getting in there. And he's going to get into this too a little bit later. I don't know how much of this we'll do today. We might do a part 2 at some point, but
we could, I think 2 parts would be good for this.
Yeah,
it might be kind of long.
I mean, this thing's 2 hours long. We're like 15 minutes in, but it's really good. I've listened to like an hour of it, and it really is solid. You could always listen to some more yourself, but and we'll link it in like the show notes so you have the link to the video. But yeah, I think he's having a reaction a lot of young people are having that had high expectations. It really felt like Trump was going to be the answer, to a lot of political problems. And while he has helped in some ways and probably not done a great job in some ways, which I'm not a fan of his sort of equivocation or like moving back and forth on H-1Bs and sort of then seeming to support it, stuff like that. And like, I don't love all the foreign policy. I really loved almost all the foreign policy up until the Iran stuff. And I'm with you, Thatcher. I'm kind of like keeping my powder dry a little bit, but I still don't think it's great. And it's especially not great if it doesn't help us at home. And if it loses young people, which it really does seem to be, InfoWars was one of the first people who supported Trump. Mm-hmm. And like Owen is a former InfoWars guy since it's now closed. He's losing his mind here. And he's like very almost anti-Trump sounding because I think he's been upset at how Trump did not drop the hammer like he wanted. And like, I think I wanted Trump 2.0 to be like, okay, Trump 1.0, you got all these fake investigations from Robert Mueller and all these people that hamstrung your first term. Then you got the election stolen from you in 2020. I legit think that election was stolen. I mean, we went to, we were watching the tape roll and it was like, oh, Yeah, this is like in the bag.
Wake up the next day.
And then it's like all reversed. And then Pennsylvania flips 3 days later. Like, yeah, I don't know about that. So, and whether or not you think it's true or not, it's at least gives if it had been the other way and the shoe had been on the other foot, imagine how you would felt if you woke up the next day and it was like the opposite result of what you expected. People were legitimately wanting answers, and elections they need to be decided fast. You shouldn't be counting for weeks like in California when then elections flip 2-3 weeks later. It's like, that's messed up. So anyway, that's a thing. And
one comment I want to make on the boomer, the one thing I disagree with them on, and then we can move on. I don't like the usage of the word Judeo-Christian.
Yeah, Owen's going to get to that.
I'm just not a fan
either.
of that word.
Well, it's kind of I feel like it's a word we've used in a good faith. We can talk about it when we get to it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it when we get to it.
Yeah.
I know we are sick of, I think I speak for most of our generation, Judeo-Christian values. Just please toss that out of the ring if we're talking politics. I don't even want to hear it. And as far as World War II is concerned, are we ever going to move on? Can we ever have a country and a foreign policy that isn't tied into the results of World War II?
Yes, I think that's...
Why not?
I think that's key.
That's ridiculous.
That is right. That's the definition of boomer, right? It's the baby boomers after the war. It's as soon as the war is over is when that generation starts. So, in a way, I sort of feel for you guys in that you were like the most affected by the change of attitude after the war in every different way. And one of the main ways was a major focus on removing race from the conversation. I feel like when you talk about immigration, to me, race has a lot to do with it. And I feel like boomers were so indoctrinated throughout their childhood, right after World War II, it was racism is the big evil. That becomes an issue because other races like when we talk about H-1Bs, Indians have a very, strong, group in America that is operating on a racial basis. And I feel like one of the biggest weaknesses of the boomer generation that allowed America to become weak was that part of humanity, of the human experience, has been ignored. And anytime I try to talk about race to boomers, it's the boomers who will get very uncomfortable and very reticent to ever bring that up. And I feel like that's, again,
is the boomer generation weak?
We'll leave that question for the next one, but there's a lot there. The Judeo-Christian thing, I get the idea from the boomer side, which is hey, a lot of values are aligned here between those two faiths. That's the idea, at least.
Yeah.
But from the other side of it, I think millennials, younger folks in general, it's not all younger folks, but they're seeing okay, let's think about it. The Jews did kill Jesus. I don't want to
That's an anti-Semitic thing.
It's an anti-Semitic thing to say. I don't think so. But there's not, the values aren't always aligned, right? And it really isn't the Judeo part that built the West.
No.
Am I wrong about that? It's the Christian, Protestant, and formerly Roman Catholic, side of things that built the West.
Yeah. So I take issue with both arguments from both the boomer and the millennial. I don't agree with the Judeo-Christian sentiment. I also don't agree with throwing out everything wholesale. I think a Christian ethic is what we need.
Agreed.
That needs to be in the discussion. You can make the argument that Judaism and Christianity have similar morals, right? Which is true. There are some morals that are similar throughout Judaism and Christianity. We both, read the Old Testament. So do Muslims. And you could make the argument that Muslims, Christians, and Jews all adhere to a morality based in the in the Old Testament. To a degree, that's true. But I think where the divide comes with Christianity and the morality of Judaism, obviously, denial of Christ is a huge thing. There's also a lot of extra biblical rules and moralities that the Jewish people hold to that we do not agree with. Same with Islam. If they just went off their morals based on the Old Testament, which they view as the inspired word of God, it would be similar to ours, but they take their morality from Muhammad, from the Quran, and from some of the hadiths. So there's a fundamental difference. We can't just lump those two things in. So that's why I have a problem with it. As a Christian, that's why I have a problem with it. I think it's also kind of something that's politically motivated. It's a phrase that's been pushed a lot politically to try and develop a support and an allegiance to Israel, which is like, it just reeks of like a clandestine, CIA operation, which I really don't like either. But generally speaking, I think our politics must be informed by Christian ethics, right? We need to have Christ at the center.
Yeah, there were two more things that were kind of mentioned in there. Like, I think we could go back and forth on that one for a decent amount, but the idea that World War II and the horrors that happened to the Jews, they were horrors, truly. Like, anytime there's mass killings, I mean, this is horror territory we're talking about. But I think what a lot of younger people have experienced is that's been almost weaponized to a degree of how much it's used to shield like Israel from any criticism whatsoever. And it's like, actually, the Russians killed off more Christians than like the Nazis killed off, because they killed off Christians, Jews, gypsies, like all sorts of different people. But we never hear about hardly ever do you hear about the horrors of atheist Russia and the murder.
Holodomor, also what they were doing during the war.
So it very much, two things are true at once. It is a horror. It should be remembered. And a lot of people don't know enough about it. But on the other hand, it has been weaponized. It is being used as a shield at times. I'm not going to say always, but it does get used that way to prevent criticism. Same way as you're a racist just shuts the conversation down and says, like, you can't criticize me anymore. Like, it can be used, by people on the right as well.
I'm not using this as like a way to grandstand against Israel or something, but when it comes to American politics and how we govern and how we move forward as a country, I don't think Judaism has any place in that. I think Christianity has more than enough morality.
Let us be Christian
to offer. Let us be Christian. Mm-hmm. We don't need the other part.
But I will say one part, and I think Thatcher will agree with me on this, and I don't know if you will or not, Jacob, but I do think, and the boomers will get into this, I think they somewhat rightly see the Muslim threat as much greater than the, I don't know what you want to call it, Israeli, Jewish way. Although I do sympathize with some arguments that the young people make, because they're saying, let me say two things at once, since I'm struggling over my words. I see both sides, I guess. On the one hand, if you look at the history of Muslim expansion and aggression and how they take over, they play the slow game until they basically slit your throats. Like, it's over at a certain point. They take over, and they are moving into Europe at crazy rates. And Europe is in bad shape because of how many Muslims have moved in. Yeah. And I think that's happening here, not as fast as it is in Europe, but I see that as a very grave threat to the country. And I don't think Muslims should be allowed to live in the United States. I don't think that their value system aligns with anything. And Charlie Kirk said this, like, their macro Islam is not compatible with the West. And that I subscribe to that Charlie Kirk model. It is not compatible. But at the same time, to give the young people on the panel their due, which they're kind of getting to this, so I'm a little preempting, but
you are preempting.
They talk about Epstein. Yeah. And we might even, I don't know if we'll get to that here in part one, but Epstein is a big deal. And he does seem to have ties to Israeli intelligence. And there was tons of satanic stuff going on from what we see. Lots and lots of bad, the worst stuff you can possibly think of. And the amount of money, influence in our government and over politicians, if that is as, the hard part is we don't know the full picture, but if it is as big as the younger people suspect, then I can see the points they're making, right? Yeah. So I'm giving both sides their due, I guess.
And to your point, I agree with you on the Islam being a threat thing. And the thing I always point to, and maybe if we have an Islamic listener, assalamu alaikum. But however,
Oh my gosh.
however,
No idea.
I know people will say it's just the radical Muslims, but I think it's the devout Muslims, the true Muslims, are the ones that have this problematic ideology. If you go to the 9th surah of the Quran, it explicitly states kind of exactly what you said, is that when you encounter these people who do not follow Allah, the polytheists, which, just so you guys know, according to Islam, we are polytheists because we believe in the triune Godhead, right? We believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They view that as 3 gods, therefore polytheist. They are commanded to convert us. And if we do not convert, they are commanded to kill us wherever they find us. So that is true Islam. I know there's other arguments, but I don't know how you argue against that.
Which, by the way, there is some language that comes up occasionally in here. I don't know if we're going to get to it in this episode or not, but just if you're still listening at this point, I would say just, bear with it if it does happen, because I think a couple of them, even the boomers let loose a little bit, and I was kind of surprised. They get a little animated at parts here.
Yeah.
But all right, we'll keep rolling.
I think
Is it a weak generation?
I would say that they allowed incrementally their country to be stolen from them, and we're sort of constantly, it's like, well, what's the problem with the guy, this guy, I mean, he's a great worker, it's fine, and it's like, well, okay, his whole family's coming, and okay, well, now his whole neighborhood has changed, and okay, now, and so it's like, you have to sort of be more hardcore and go, I don't care if it's mean, it's our country, you can't have it.
Well,
and I feel like boomers are weak in that regard.
That's a view that's universally shared by millennials. I haven't seen any sign of that.
Well, I would say that the people that are mad at Donald Trump are people like myself. When a guy that I debated for, a guy that I voted for 3 times, said that he was going to deport all these illegals, and yet he's deported less people than Barack Obama,
Right.
a guy that we all don't like. And then if you actually kind of look at the conspiracy behind that, it's because he has all these multinational corporations in his ear basically calling the shots when he says at the beginning of his presidency, well, the hotel workers, they get to stay, it's no big deal. So, yeah, I do think that there are being, and like I said, I like Donald Trump, but he's been incredibly weak when it comes to immigration. When he campaigned that he was going to build a wall, they can't find any money to build a wall. They can't find, any solution to the SAVE Act. So it seems like if he really was authoritarian, like the left describes him, he would be able to do all this stuff that he said he was going to do.
Right.
So, he's talking a little bit about immigration and the country being stolen out from under them, like under all of us, but really on the boomers' watch. They were responsible because they were the generation in control and power, right? That's kind of the gist of what he was saying. And then he's also reiterating his being upset with Trump because he's promised a lot and has not really fully delivered. I do think probably could have mentioned some of the things like closing the border is a good thing. And I think the average length of time of the people that we're actually deporting aren't immediate, like at the border deportations where they like catch and release, they can grab them and then deport. It's actually like people who've been in the interior of the country for 3-4 years that have been here. And so it is a little bit different, but I will say I want the deportations to increase as well. And I think we shouldn't apologize. And I think we should drop the hammer on that and really do a full mass deportation like we were promised.
Yeah, there's a reason why I voted for Trump.
Right. And a lot of people, immigration is the number one issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is the number one on his list.
Yeah. So
we've heard way more about foreign policy, right, Jacob?
Yeah.
Than we have about immigration.
Yeah. And yeah, that is the reason I voted for Trump. One of the main reasons I voted for Trump. And I feel, just being honest, that mark has not been hit.
Not good enough.
I wish Trump was as evil and authoritarian as the left makes him out to be. I wish he was doing all the things they said he was.
By the way, you might as well be if you're already being accused of it, right? I mean, if politically they're going to score the same points whether or not it's true or false because they're lying to their constituents that you're this mean big baddie that's like deporting all these people. And it's like, actually, they're really not deporting that many people. They've just closed the border.
Yeah, honestly, like go through with the deportations.
Just do it.
Be the authoritarian leader that everyone thinks you are. Get them all out of the country. When you're gone and dead, someone's going to write a history book. They're either going to say, this guy was really evil, he did all these evil things, or they're going to say, this guy saved the country. And that's not your problem because you're dead.
It's
just
all
like
about,
do it.
It's all about demographics and voting and who stays in power. I mean, that's the whole, and the Democrats cloak this in Christian compassion. They have the audacity to take the name of Christ and basically say they use it as a cloak and shield, and they do their deeds of darkness basically with that shield, to say, oh, we're being compassionate. It's like, actually, you just want your voters. And you know that if you promise them free things, welfare checks, and you give them social security numbers like we've seen they've been doing, and they get those benefits from people who are losing out on those benefits, which, sorry, boomers who have had their social security stolen and stuff, like that's a real thing. Lots of people have had their social securities like basically been stolen. And
I don't even know if that's as much with the boomers as it is.
Well, and a lot of
X.
it's phone scams too. People calling and to older generations that don't, they're either not fully mentally present sometimes. And so they'll give their information, or they just don't know. They just are too trusting. They haven't grown up in the same, multicultural moral soup that we have as younger people.
With AI now too, where you're able to dub somebody's voice and make it sound fairly authentic to somebody.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's getting even worse, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, at least a lot of email spammers have the they do the courtesy of misspelling one word in there, so that the normals like us who read it, we're like, wait a minute, he misspelled there. It's like, okay, I know this is spam.
Yeah.
I want to say too, with he said Trump has deported less illegals than Obama. I want to say somewhere in Crowder, Gerald on there said something like, it's not really what the statistic they're going off of isn't really the same thing. It's like looked at. So I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
But it needs to be more regardless.
100% needs to be more. And I think he would have done more if places, I think it was Michigan or Minnesota, didn't fight back against Trump so hard. And get ICE agents out of here.
I mean, but we have a lot of other states.
Oh yeah, no, that's the thing. That's why local small elections are just as important as big elections. Like,
I think more important, dude.
Yeah,
honestly.
Yes and no, but yeah,
you can have. I mean, if you have a dictator president, but you have people that are hold to the Constitution in your small communities in your own states, then they can't do as much against you if they're stepping up against them.
Yeah.
I do vice versa too.
Go ahead, Jacob.
I would argue that Thatcher's 100% correct because
stop.
Yeah, no, I'm serious.
Building Thatcher up.
No, listen to this, Kyle. You have seen how effective these rogue governors have been against Trump when Trump tries to come in and do stuff. Imagine that, but if they were the good guys. That means that local election ensures that even in the event of a horrible president that wants to enact horrible things, the local government still has the power to resist that and not roll over.
Well, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I hate to be the third person to agree in this little party of ours, but the book of Proverbs talks a lot about bribing judges. And one of the things that, not to be too conspiratorial, but there's been a lot of money given by Soros and other people to local judge elections and state, AG elections, basically, to get corrupt judges in place. I mean, you see these people that are like 14-time offenders get released the next day, it's like, and then they go murder somebody. Like
they go stab a girl in the neck.
Right, Irina Zaruska, I think is her name. And like a bunch of different times this happens all over in big Democrat machine cities. And like the way that they steal national elections is by solidifying these local big cities like Chicago, like New York, and they make it so that it's the corrupt political Democrat machines there. And it's like, well, cheating doesn't happen. We would have known that there would have been, judges that would have ruled on these things. It's like they own the judges, people. It's not like that hard to understand. Like the city politic, right, for these big cities, they are essentially a vertical. Yeah, they're like a vertical controlled by one party.
Yeah.
So
I think
one last quick one, because they did mention this, and then we can end on this thought, because and maybe we do a little segment on it here, but maybe we tie it over into the next one. I still don't know 100% where I stand on the question of race a little bit, because they did mention, the second millennial guy mentioned whenever race comes up, boomers get uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about race, right? And then he mentioned the Indians basically come over here as a unit and they act, in their racial interests. Like they settle together, they identify as a group, they work together to achieve common goals, like based on their race. I'm not trying to say one way or the other whether or not I agree with this.
Notably, people from literally every other country on this earth that have like homogenous racial makeups are very racist
not
people.
To single, right. Not to single anybody out or anything. But what I guess what I'm saying is, what do you guys think about that? Because I certainly, at least for myself, I feel like I grew up in that sort of colorblind, time, and it's not really that way anymore, I think.
That's a big question.
Maybe we should save it for next time.
I think that should be our teaser. That should be our little
tough
carrot
one,
on a stick.
It's such a hard question to me, a little bit. It's easy and it's hard. I don't know.
Yeah. I think we should save it for the next one.
Okay.
I think we can end it here. We've gone quite a long time, and then have another episode to kind of get
maybe
further
this will
through
already
this.
be 2 parts. We could release a series of these. I don't know. We'll do them throughout the week or something. I have no idea. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll let Jacob tell me what to do, and then I'll do it afterwards.
I'm the idea guy, so
yeah, generator.
But yeah, and because I'm the host, I'll sign us off.
Oh,
so for this half,
are we going to get a closing thought?
Yeah, for this half of the debate between boomers and millennials.
Do like a summary.
Thatcher, do you have a closing thought?
Yes. Both sides need work. Both sides need to see what the other one is dealing with. Not necessarily empathize, but try to understand it, and realize that both sides have work to do. It's not just, okay, we'll talk about this and that's over. I feel like that's what a lot of these conversations can do. They have the conversation, and that's as far as it goes. And we don't change anything. All these people that are on this panel, most of them don't have regular everyday jobs like we do. They're hosts of something, they're the leaders of an organization or something like that. And so they're not necessarily in the typical person's perspective. So,
yeah. Kyle, what do you think?
I really loved this whole thing. I would encourage people to go listen. Obviously, if you want to listen to us and our review of it, I think you should do that first. But, if you want to go listen to just the thing, it's really good.
They can listen to this and then listen to the whole thing and then listen to part 2.
It's good. You should. I really think it's important. It's a good conversation. I do think that a lot of the older boomer lady, she did a great job in her initial opening statement of just kind of saying, if you take a zoom out, like, young people often feel like misunderstood or a little bit entitled, and older people are not as understanding, and they kind of like, they're out of touch, maybe just, that's always the trope, I guess. And I can see that. I thought the millennials, and they didn't do this as much in this segment, but I think they're overreacting a little bit on how badly Trump has done. I think he's actually done better by and large than they're maybe making out to be. But I understand why, and they make the argument a little bit later on, is they're kind of like, it's now or never. It's like boomers are always saying, well, Trump's advancing the ball and it's like, well, eventually you have to score. It's like, we need to win, and I do get it. So I guess I kind of feel a little similar to both sides. I have some from each that I feel they did well, and it's very interesting to hear the boomers' perspectives. It really is, because while I do feel like they're like a time capsule, their comments almost feel like they're coming from a different planet. They do have truths that they can impart that are wise and they're perspective giving. And even if it is just a time capsule at worst, and it's like not true to today, you can still at least see what it was like in a different time. I think that's at worst, but I do think they have a lot to share and contribute. So.
Yeah, I'm just going to take the mushy middle position here and just agree with everybody and say that I think both sides have valid points. I think both sides are misunderstood a little bit, and I think we benefit a lot from open discussion. To Thatcher's point, oftentimes I think it doesn't go anywhere, but I think there is potential for these kinds of discussions if they're had all over the country, around the dinner table, in people's small groups, whatever it may be. These kinds of discussions are what lead to maybe more of an understanding across this like age divide. And I think we do just need to work together in a way, right? Because the boomers are here and the millennials are here. And until the boomers die off from old age and the millennials all die in war, that's going to be the case. That's going to be the demographic for a little while. So we need to figure this out. So I think this is going to be really beneficial. I think our commentary on it might be a little beneficial. And I'm just happy that we're doing this. I think this is important.
Do you want to do a part 2 for next time? I think it'd be good to at least try to do a little bit more. We won't do the whole thing because it's so long.
No, we're doing part two.
Part
sorry.
4. Who knows? Maybe we'll break it up.
Yeah, part 4. No, part 2 will be next week. I think we'll probably release them. We'll give us a little bit of a break so we don't necessarily have to record every single week, which we've been doing this weekly. I hope you guys enjoy that. It's a lot of work, but we feel led to do it, and it's important. And Kyle is lifting a majority of the weight on this project as far as all the audio editing and cutting everything in, putting the clips in, and getting everything posted. So he's the real muscle in the operation. And all I do is come here and yap, and all Thatcher does is listen and then drop a bomb every few minutes.
Drops a haymaker, and then he invites you to a prayer night. It's like, bro, you just destroyed me. Why am I going to a prayer night with you after that?
Yeah, but I think this is really good, and we're going to have another one next week, hopefully, Lord willing. And until next time, this has been Reform or Die. Peace.